Our opening hymn is number 16 in the gray hymnal. Yep, 16. 'Tis a gift to be simple. I thought it was a gift to be strange. It's a gift to be simple. And please stand if you're willing and able. Thank you.
I vote we change it to strange. So just we're strange anyway. Tis a gift to be simple, tis a gift to be free, tis a gift to come down where we ought to be. And when we find ourselves in the place just right, we'll be in the valley of love and delight. When true simplicity is gained, to bow and to bend we shan't be ashamed. To turn, turn will be our delight, till by turning, turning we come round right. 'Tis a gift to be simple, 'tis a gift to be free, 'tis a gift to come down where we ought to be. And when we find ourselves in the place just right, we'll be in the valley of love and delight. When true simplicity is gained, to bow and to bend we shan't be ashamed. To turn, turn will be our delight, till by turning, turning we come round right.
Thank you. Please be seated. Okay. Morning, I'm Ken Willingham. I am your worship leader this morning. Ours is a welcoming community where we find connection and meaning, a sharing community where our joys are amplified, a caring community where our sorrows are lessened. We also welcome guests from Facebook Live and our Zoom audience. And do we have any out there? Appears not. See, two. Okay, we welcome everyone, regardless of race, creed, color, social level, economic status, gender identity, or whom you love. Our musician this morning is him, Mark Wilson. I'm getting a tech person is Nancy in the back and Molly up on the screen, ready from home. I just put this in my speech, so I'm new at it. All are welcome here. Do we have any visitors this morning here in the sanctuary? We do. If you would like to, you may just stand, tell us your name and where you're from.
My name's Flip. I'm right from just down the road, and the topic today caught my eye, so here I am.
Very good. Thank you. Welcome. Any other visitors here? No. Any visitors online, Molly?
No visitors.
Thank you. Okay, there are church announcements this morning? No church announcement. Up there's one.
Good morning, I'm Tom. I have two quick announcements. First of all, next week we're going to do pet blessings or animal, I prefer to say animal companion blessings. So there will be live animals here. And I want people to know that if there are any allergy concerns, to please be aware and either go online or or make other plans, but it's a service that we've done many times, and but we want to be sensitive to everyone's needs. So if there are allergy issues, please make use of the online effort. The other thing, I announced this about 6 weeks ago. My friend Randy and his club, the Sterling Club, do a cookout every 6 or 8 weeks at the Simpson Food Fair parking lot. This is a big thing. Again, these are not people with a Weber grill. These are people with big smokers, and they do chicken, pork, fish, whatever, and then the money they raise goes for scholarship funds. So if you want lunch, there is a flyer in the back, and you can go by. They go until they sell out, and you can also expect to stand in line. So anyway, I want to make those 2 announcements. Thanks very much.
Okay. Yes. Nobody's done Fall Festival yet, see, so you're up.
Next week is Fall Festival. No, we've got a lot of stuff that's going to be made easier this year. There's a sign-up sheet out on the front table. There's a QR code for our Sign-Up Genius. The big ask of this entire congregation, online and in here, 4 hours, just you and a friend, one day next week, right? It's broken into 4-hour sections. There's was it 10 to 2, 2 to 6, and then like 6 to 9:30-ish, 10 o'clock or so. So yeah, 6 till food runs out. Well, hopefully it runs out. We'll try to short it. There are some day manager positions, but I think basically the folks who've been working on the committee will cover those for the most part. So don't get overwhelmed with anything like that. However, 4 hours, you and your best friend, a neighbor, make your kids come, make your nieces, nephews, just 4 hours, one day next week is really what we're asking for, okay? So if you could, please take a look and try to do it. It'll be much simpler this year. Celeste and the team have put together like a nice, simple sort of menu, nice, simple way to kind of put everything together. So should be good to go. Yeah, I guess that'll be it.
Can you add to the people at home and the World Wide Web that there will be air conditioning in the booth this year?
Sure, there will be air conditioning in the booth. And with global warming, I assume it's going to be a hotter year than last year. So there will be air conditioning in the booth. Yeah, I don't know. We'll have seats in there, right? Only room for 2 anyway. The goal, so I feel bad, actually, I don't know if Susan's on. I forgot to add her to our email list. But we're going to try to double or triple what we've made the last couple of years, and I think we're going to do it. So just for everybody here, that's like $6,000 to $10,000 of money for this congregation to do whatever, whether it's spaghetti suppers, whether it's fixing stuff around here, whether it's donating to Cage. That's a lot of money for what we do. And again, the whole push this year, we're basically kind of giving ourselves like a 2-year window to make it profitable, because it just hasn't been the last couple of years. And if we can't, then we'll probably bail on Fall Festival. But I've been a part of a couple other nonprofits that pull in 25 to 30 every single year with Fall Festival. For us to make 10, I think is manageable, and we should probably be making more. And that's a lot that we can do in this group. Okay, so 4 hours, you and a friend, one day next week. Thanks. I gotta use the card.
And with that,
No, I've got an online one.
oh, someone online. Okay, go for it.
Go ahead, Marcia. We need to unmute. We can't hear you, Marcia. You're unmuted, but we cannot hear you. I'm sorry. You're not coming through.
Sign language.
She says, okay, forget it. Thank you. If you type it in chat, I can tell them. She's typing. Sorry. She hasn't sent it yet, so I don't know what she says yet.
Got one finger to type with that.
Yeah. Oh, now she's not sending it? I don't know. Oh, there it is. Next Sunday, the Islamic Center dinner to raise money for the food bank. Just a reminder that that's happening next Sunday. Thank you. Thank you, Marcia.
Thank you. Okay, so oh, we have another. Okay, go for it.
Do you know what next Sunday is?
Not yet.
Animal blessings.
Yeah, I heard
So
about
bring your pups, bring your cats, bring your birds, bring your whatever reptiles, and we'll bless them.
Thank you. Yeah, Tom had already announced that before you got here. Okay. Okay, now. Okay, onward and forward. Each week we spend a few minutes stepping across the aisle to greet and welcome each other. And we have a new person here. We have another new person back there who showed up a little bit later. And I will hit the chime when it's time to come back. Go for it. Are you ready, sir? Are you ready, sir? I already volunteered someone. We light our chalice. We light this chalice, symbol of our purpose to bring more love and justice into the world. We light this chalice knowing our congregation as a church dispersed across communities, not bound by walls, but connected through the web of life. Now it's time for our offertory. Thank you, Brian. Time for our offertory. May I have 2 volunteers, please? And as a guest, perfectly fine to let the plate pass you by. Just your presence is honor enough for us today. The offering that we take each Sunday isn't just a stale habit. It's an opportunity to recommit to this place and to this people. Our offering is an affirmation, a yes. When we give, we say yes to something we value. With our gifts freely given, may we say yes to the values of our faith. May our offering help us practice Unitarian Universalism within and beyond our congregation as tools to empower our mission. Thank you for your offering today. Is there a story for all ages? There is. Do you need a mic? You have it?
Kids want to come up?
Hey, kids. Doesn't matter what your age is. Come on up.
Kids will like. Morning. This morning we have a cool story. It's called The What Ifs. Written by Emily Kilgore, illustrated by Zoe Persico. The what ifs. You ever ask yourself, what if? Okay. Everybody's telling me lately I mumble, so yeah. Try to enunciate. Cora was a nervous girl. Always jumpy, always on edge, always wondering if something grim was going to happen. Because of this, the what ifs loved her. Heavy, lumpy, and jumpy, the what ifs are everywhere. In bright rooms, in dark corners, in busy hallways, in hushed libraries, in big cities and small towns. They slink in from unknown places and swiftly attach themselves to people when they least expect it. Then they whisper a question so quietly, so softly, so gently, that the person usually doesn't know the what ifs are there at all. From the moment the sun first peeked through her window in the morning to the time she pulled a warm quilt over her head at night, Cora's what ifs followed her every move. What if my dog runs away? What if I forget my homework? What if the sun stops shining? What if my crayon breaks? That's a bummer. Many people think about their what ifs for a moment or two, but can briskly brush them off. Cora, though, could not. It didn't matter if the what ifs questions were silly or frightening, likely or impossible. As soon as Cora thought about them, the what ifs grabbed hold of her. One week, Cora had more what ifs than usual. Her piano recital was just days away. Even though she had practiced and perfected her song, the what ifs started creeping in. What if my fingers shake? Cora questioned on Monday. What if I make a mistake? Cora wondered on Tuesday. What if nobody comes? She thought on Wednesday. What if too many people come? She worried on Thursday. By the day of her recital, the weight of the what ifs felt unbearable. Cora stood backstage, anxiously awaiting her turn to perform. The longer she waited, the more what ifs appeared, each one grabbing hold and weighing her down more than the last. What if I trip on stage? What if the bench is too tall? What if the pedals are squeaky? What if I start coughing? What if I play the wrong note? What if nobody claps? Cora, a small voice whispered, are you all right? Oh, great, Cora thought. What if Stella thinks I'm a crybaby? What if she doesn't understand? It's nothing, was Cora all she could muster before a tiny sob escaped her thinly pressed lips. Doesn't sound like nothing, Stella said. Cora took a deep breath and said in a hushed voice, I just have too many what ifs. They make me imagine bad things that could happen, like what if I mess up? Or what if I sneeze during my song? Everybody gets what ifs, Cora. Just a minute ago, I asked myself, what if Cora's sad and I can help? Listening to Stella, Cora started to wonder, what if she can help me? What if I can trust her? I wish mine were like that. My what ifs are grim. Cora looked down. Do you ever have good what ifs? Stella asked. I didn't know there were good ones, Cora whispered. Of course there are, Stella said. Like, what if there's chocolate cake after our recital? Or what if I played better than ever? Cora chimed in, peering at the boy pounding his piece on the piano. Cora suddenly felt her what ifs begin to change. The heavy, lumpy, and grumpy what ifs slowly slunk away, while new ones arrived in its place. That one looks like my dog. Just then, the teacher announced it was Cora's turn. Cora walked out into the piano without tripping. The bench was just the right height. Her hands quivered as they hovered over the keys, but then she sat down and began to play. And the grim what if slowly continued to disappear until clunk. She hit the wrong note. Oh no, what if everybody laughs at me? What if I get booed off the stage? Cora wanted to cry. She tried to ignore the people staring, waiting for her next move. Then, out of the corner of her eye, Cora saw Stella. What if I can do this, she asked herself. Cora took a deep breath and started to play again with confidence. Her fingers danced across the keys. When she finished, the room filled with applause. Cora took her bow and smiled at Stella. She couldn't help but wonder, what if? What if I made a new friend today? Chocolate cake. It's one of my best friends, chocolate. Anyway, the end.
We have to wait for him to put the mic stand away because he's up next, again. Love surrounds you everywhere, everywhere you may go. I didn't know we were singing the children out. Thank you. And they'd be here. We'd sing for something else. Opening words.
Church. What thoughts or images come to mind when you hear that word? Peaceful, friends, music, maybe community, a shelter from the storm. For many, it does conjure such things, but for others, it's far from it. Maybe for others, it's a trigger because of such things as manipulation, judgment, verbal abuse, division. Many of you know that Jamye and I were in churches in the past, not very much at all like this one. I can't say it was 100% bad, but there were definitely times we felt like calling it quits due to the abusive leadership. I have to say that, for me personally, I stuck with it because of my faith, and I really enjoyed being involved in the music program. I hope she doesn't mind me saying this, but she had to go through a lot more crap than I did. Two reasons come to mind. One, I was a man, not a woman, and two, I was the golden boy because of my musical ability. Anyway, I'm looking forward to hearing my wife speak. It was very tempting to read her notes, but I decided to sit back. I'm going to sit back and listen to her say these words for the first time. Many stories you're going to hear from people we personally knew and also from ourselves. I thank you all for coming.
Thank you, Mark. Now it's time for before we have our main speaker, time for our joys and sorrows. We take a few moments each week to reflect on our joys and sorrows and acknowledge the mutual support of our community. If you would like, you may come forward. We take a few minutes each week just to sit quietly. Go within yourself, meditate, sit quietly, read your own mind, whatever you choose to do. But just remember to allow yourself to expand. Feel those around you. Feel your own energy above, beside, behind, in front. It is 360. And feel the energy of those around you. In a few moments, I'll call you out. We'll sing number 123, Spirit of Life, in the gray hymnal.
stirrings of compassion, blow in the wind, rise in the sea, move in the hand, giving life the shape of justice, roots hold me close, wings set me free, Spirit of light, come to me, come to me.
Thank you, Mark. Do come up.
I wanted to preface. I'm going to share with something Mark said in opening words, in that we understand that the experiences we had don't reflect on all people's experiences, all faith paths. People have had good and rich and meaningful experiences in their various experiences, and we're happy for that. And so I don't want to paint a broad picture of religion bad, just maybe a balanced picture of healthy versus unhealthy, and how we can find our way in a more healthy way of being in whatever path or spiritual journey we have. So I'm going to start off. I reached out. Well, one of the things I want to say is I'm really thankful that my unpacking, my processing of the experiences of my past happened in the day of social media. It's made it way easier to connect with people who have had similar experiences. And so I've been in various chat groups. As Molly will attest, I watch TikTok because she had to join TikTok just so she could share a couple of video clips I want to do, because those have been platforms where a lot of people have shared experiences, people from a lot of different faith paths that have had these experiences, but they had common themes, even though some of them were completely different faiths than my own. But in that social media, I reached out to some people that I know and asked if I could share some of their stories. And I won't be talking about some of our own, but I'm going to start with Elle. I'm giving everybody just a first, later, keeping everybody anonymous. So Elle wrote me this. This is an abbreviated version that captures a few of the highlights that took me from where I was to where I am now in my spiritual journey. I was raised in a conservative Southern evangelical church from birth. Teenage years for me were tumultuous as my parents divorced. My mom took my sister and I to a small Baptist church looking for comfort. This was in the late 60s, early 70s, and at that time, even though different now, I find some of the same judgmental attitudes prevail. The chairman of the deacons warned all the youth group to stay away from my sister and me, as we were teenagers from a broken home, and we could taint them. My mother was shunned, even though she was devastated that my father had abruptly left her for another woman. In my search for love, in my confusion and teenage angst, I found myself pregnant at the age of 17. The pastor deemed it necessary that I be brought forward in the front of the church and made to confess that I was a very bad, wicked girl, and promised never to sin again. If I did that, the church would vote to see if I was ever allowed to, in the pastor's words, darken their doors again. I did not know I had an option, and no one told me differently, so I did what they asked. To this day, I remember standing there as a young girl, shaking, terrified and alone, and can still see the hands that voted that I should be shunned. They decided the only thing that would redeem me was to set me up in a marriage between me and a boy that they had handpicked. Again, I had no one to stand up for me, and I so badly wanted to be a good girl. So I married the person they picked. He turned out to be extremely physically violent, molested my young daughter, and that's just a couple of the highlights. When I finally got up the nerve to divorce him, I was kicked out of that church permanently, and he was welcome to stay. As years went by, I found myself searching for an authentic God, and not who these people represented God to be. At this stage of my life, I am not involved in any type of organized religion. I have a love for God, who I see as an amazing creator and who encapsulates perfect, unconditional love. Never again will I be in an organized religion that men from hundreds of years ago or even more recently sat together in a room and decided that their interpretation of God would be, and that those of us who did not accept that interpretation would be considered wrong. It has been a long, oftentimes painful spiritual exploration process for me, but I'm now at a personal, peaceful place with my relationship with who or what I call God. Now, that's not an uncommon story, unfortunately. I'm going to tell you another one. This seems a little less obvious, but that's why I wanted to put these side by side. This is a sermon I remember hearing a couple decades ago. It was the mashed potato sermon. And it was basically, when you come into the church, it's like you're a potato, and the first thing you do when you're going to make mashed potatoes is you carve out all the I's, which means all sense of personal identity. And the end of the story, I'm not going to go into the whole thing, but it was like, in the end, you're just an amalgamation. There's no individuality. There's no personal, I always like to liken the church to a stained glass window, because we each have our own place, our own color, our own shape, our own distinction. And people would look at me like, no, we're all supposed to be alike. I actually remember calling a pastor's wife once, crying, going, but I don't want to be a clone, because that was exactly the feeling it left you with, that these are the ways you must be. And if you are any different than that, you are not okay. And so those are actually two examples. One's a really obvious one, bringing up a frightened girl in front of a church and shaming her. And the other is just like the soup you live in, of conform, conform, conform. We'll tell you what you can think. We'll tell you the movies that you can watch or not watch. And just individuality just being crushed. And so what I'd like to do here is have Molly play that first clip from TikTok that I shared with her.
I think a lot of people are confused about what religious trauma is, what constitutes religious trauma, and how people get it. And I think a lot of this is because there's a lack of awareness, but also because there's a lot of confusion around the word trauma. Many people think that trauma is something that you get from one big event that happens to you. You get in a car accident. But trauma can actually happen in small doses over time. And I think that's what happens with a lot of people in religion. It's when you're being fed some information that is harmful to you on a regular basis, and you internalize it, and then it impacts who you are as a person. It impacts your personality, your mental state. So if, for example, if you're being taught every single week or on a regular basis that you are a sinner, you are unworthy of God's love, that you are not good enough on your own and you never will be, that everything about you is bad, and that you need God to cover you because without his covering, you're just worthless. That in itself is enough to impact how a person sees themselves, their self-esteem, and how they live their life. And then, of course, when you leave the religion and you step out, you're going to experience shunning from your community and your family, a loss of identity because you have put your entire identity in this religion. All of those things together can combine to create a lot of trauma in a person, and then it impacts their mental state, their mental health, the way they view the world, the way they view themselves, and the way they approach their relationships with other people. Marlene Weinell is a psychologist who coined the phrase religious trauma syndrome in 2011. She also wrote a book called Leaving the Fold, which is for former fundamentalists who have left the faith and are kind of trying to figure out how this has affected them and unpacking all of that. But just a quick rundown on religious trauma syndrome. It is recognized in psychology and psychotherapy as a set of symptoms ranging in severity experienced by those who have participated in or left behind authoritarian, dogmatic, and controlling religious groups and belief systems. The symptoms can range from cognitive with confusion, difficulty making decisions, critical thinking, disassociation, identity confusion, all the way to, panic attacks, suicidal ideation, anger, grief, loneliness, sleep and eating disorders, nightmares, substance abuse, rupture of family and social network, employment issues. I mean, the list goes on. I've even heard it said that religious trauma syndrome can present just like PTSD does. Me personally, I've experienced most of those things on that list, and they all can be pinpointed back to my religious indoctrination and the trauma that I received from leaving the fold, leaving the faith. And some people might not ever get traumatized. That's the thing about us, human beings, is that we all have different brains and we all take things differently. We all see things differently. What helps someone and gives someone peace and comfort might actually traumatize someone else. And that's why it's important to not approach religion as if it is a blanket, because it's just not realistic and it is dangerous. I think a lot of people are confused about what religious trauma is.
Okay. So she gave a really great nutshell of what that looks like, and I wanted to bring out, I think she mentioned that it does a lot of times present like PTSD, or I feel like, especially for the more subtle versions where you were just in a very ongoingly controlling environment, more like CPTSD. For those who are unfamiliar with that term, that's complex PTSD. PTSD is for people who have had a horrific event, something you can go, that thing happened at a very specific time. CPTSD often presents for people who are in long-term, a child who has been abused for years, or a wife or a husband who has been in an abusive relationship for years and years and years. And so it's like maybe no single event, just a super controlling atmosphere that impacts you so that you wind up presenting with many of those. I definitely recognize some of those things. I had also listed things like poor critical thinking skills. I'm listing off some of these symptoms for people who have identified themselves as religious trauma survivors. Difficult making decisions. This is great because you second guess everything. You have to be right 100%, 100% of the time. And Mark, I've heard him say, I always feel like people know better than me if I'm in a situation. And that's that second guessing atmosphere. We're the authorities and we will tell you what is right. And if you challenge that, as a matter of fact, I remember being a part of a church that I now refer to as a cult. I don't know if it actually reaches that threshold of diagnostic, but it's close enough as far as I'm concerned. The idea explicitly stated to me was, if the pastor, first of all, you always obey the pastor. And if the pastor tells you to do something wrong, do it anyway, because God will judge the pastor, but you will be blessed because you're obedient. And I was like, I'm not going to do that. I still had enough of my own identity and that I would just push back. The cognitive dissonance was really difficult because in many ways, what I like to say is they hooked it to something I did believe in, but then they dragged me to a place where it felt like I can't say no. Like my friend in the story, she didn't know she could say no. And many people in these situations don't know they can say no to a situation. They don't know they can say, I disagree with that statement. Because if you're hearing this message today, this was something we would hear. If you're here today, if you're hearing this message today, God wanted you to hear it, and you better not disobey God. I mean, which was especially fun in Bible school when you'd have a preacher preaching one thing one week and a different preacher saying the opposite the next week. But you were supposed to somehow sort that out. Okay, moving on. Some of the other symptoms: a decreased sense of self-worth, difficulty building strong relationships, being unfamiliar with mainstream culture, isolation, struggling with fitting in and belonging, nightmares. I remember all my dreams of the apocalypse. Sleeping issues, eating issues, sexual dysfunction, anxiety issues. I'm going to stop there for a second and talk about again, with that similar experience, we were part of the homeschooling community there. And ironically, I started homeschooling because I wanted my kids to have good critical thinking skills. And the way the curriculum was being presented for the public schools where we were was the opposite of that. But we were still a part of a religious community, and the homeschooling support group that we all attended to help each other really promoted fear. Any minute, CPS is going to show up at your door and take your children because you dare to homeschool. I mean, this was really baked in, and I was telling Mark, I remember days at home with the children, and I was really making every effort to educate them well. And so I had that pressure of just being a good mom, but any minute, that knock on the door. And so my anxiety levels at those times would be like 9 on a daily basis. And so that was the more subtle version, because it wasn't one event, it was just this high anxiety that you stayed in. But it was being reiterated and reindoctrinated, and stories were told. Oh, did you hear what happened to whatever? And so that definitely contributed to a lot of anxiety in my life, obviously. Moving on, depression symptoms, grief symptoms, and loneliness. The grief for me came more in when I started walking away from that. And I was like, okay, this has been all my life has been about for literal decades. And now I'm having to go, okay, I'm done now. And that doesn't happen overnight, no matter how thoroughly you believe that you're choosing the right thing. And so I looked at that as, okay, I'm going through the grieving process of leaving a life that I really believed in behind. And, they talk about the stages of grief. I stayed in anger for a really long time. I was angry at what had been put upon me, and I was also angry at myself for not recognizing much sooner how flawed all of that was and how damaging it was. All right, second TikTok video, if you would, Molly.
You deal with it someday when you're older. Religious trauma is not about if you were forced to go to church or not. It's about the things we were taught when we were in church, and for most of us outside of it as well. Like young children being taught that they are born desperately wicked and that somebody has to die in a very graphic, violent manner in order for their awful sins to be redeemed. Religious trauma is caused when 12-year-old girls are taught that their value as a woman lies in their ability to protect men from their bodies. Religious trauma is caused by people experiencing abuse at the hands of spiritual leaders in their lives, like the countless victims of sexual assault at the hands of priests and youth pastors and other leaders. Religious trauma is caused when you're a young child laying awake in bed at night, saying a prayer over and over again in hopes that you don't see a demon or somehow end up accidentally going to hell. That fear lives in your body and stays there until you deal with it someday when you're older. Religious trauma is a legitimate mental health issue, and when you invalidate that, you are protecting abusers.
All right, so she gave some really great examples, and all of those are very familiar to me, either firsthand or by association with people who experience them. Springboarding off of a couple of the things she said, just that whole the whole left behind concept. The rapture's going to happen. You better get right. I remember going to, it had to be preteen. It was a Bible school camp that I went to in the summer, and it was a sleepover camp. You were there for the week. And I remember one night some preacher came up and just painted the most terrifying picture of being left behind. You're going to show up someday. All your family's going to be gone, and you're going to be left behind in this hellscape. And I remember me and several other, all the preteen boys that are still trying to be cool, crying, weeping in fear and shaking, and praying at the altar. No, I'm gonna accept what you're telling me I need to accept so that that doesn't happen to me. That's trauma, and that is, not to put too fine a point on it, child abuse, really. The hard thing about that situation is they obviously sincerely believe that they are doing a good thing by scaring you straight, I guess, is the way they might put it. I'm going to share a couple of other examples of people that I personally know. Again, I'm just giving in a first initial for anonymity. Kay was married to a very charming, charismatic man. Really great guy. Everybody loved him. He was abusing her horrifically, and none of us knew. None of us knew. There were some people you'd hear stories, and I'd go, oh yeah, I could see that. My jaw was on the floor when I learned about him. She and he and their family were living abroad as part of a ministry. They were entirely supported financially by the organization they were connected with. And so when she finally had enough and left, they were understanding of her need to separate, but they said, we will only continue to support you financially if you will agree to marriage counseling with the view of reconciliation. And she refused. She's like, no, I am done. I am leaving. I am taking my children. And so she was cut off. He was not, but she was. And so she did have to find her own way in a new profession. Many of the folks like Mark and I who have left like real serious ministry have had to go, okay, so I don't have the marketable skills that most people have. Now what? And so many, especially women, I am not crying, I promise. My eyes are just super watery. Especially the women are very undereducated. And so they are really limited when they leave an abuser as to how to move forward. And many of them are leaving as single mothers. And so H is another example. Her family was super religious. She married to a narcissistic, manipulative abuser, stayed with it for years, and when she finally left him, her entire family shunned her. Like literally wrote her a letter saying, you're not allowed at the house anymore. And went to a family wedding. She was not allowed in any of the family pictures. And lives in the same town with her father and siblings. And if she literally her had a flat tire one day and thought, they're 10 minutes away and I can't call them for help. And so it did not matter the things that were spelled out. And they believed her, the stories that she told about the way he treated her. It didn't matter. Didn't matter. It was an ungodly thing to leave your husband. You just stay. And again, with both of these women, they were very undereducated. And so they both really struggled to find ways to support themselves and their children. I almost said the name out loud, but the one woman, her ex-husband could have supported them, but he kept hiding funds so that he did not have to give it to her or his children. How many people here have seen the documentary on Amazon, Shiny Happy People? Okay, only one. All right, so that's a really great example of what we're talking about. So if you haven't seen it, watch it. Yes, I was just going to mention, it's about the Duggar family. You know, you guys know that show 19 and Counting or something like that, we were not a part of that, but we were very adjacent to it. The Bible school Mark went to insisted that the same training that the Duggars are part of, the ATI, what was ATI stand for? Okay, I don't remember. Yes, and it's Bill Gothard training, and so the Bible school he went to, that was a required course to take while you were there, and it's all about, it was very patriarchal, you know, husband's the head, wife submits to him, children submits to her and him, but what? Rock and rolls of the devil, and have as many children as you can. And I mean, that was a trauma in and of itself. I had friends who completely were on board with that idea and would have as many children as they could and were overwhelmed. were overwhelmed. I had friends who were crying because they were afraid that with the next pregnancy, there would be, physical problems and different issues, and then the husbands were having to support this ever-growing family. And very often, and this comes out in the Shiny Happy People documentary, older children are given way more responsibility than they should, because with a new baby, that gets assigned to an older sibling to do most of the care. And we knew a family that they subscribed to this. They had just an ongoing number of children to the point that when they would say, okay, kids, we're having another baby, the older kids would start to cry, because it was just more being put upon them, sometimes even more than the parents. And the Duggar family is very reflective of that. In fact, just this week or two, one of the Duggar older children who has separated from her family and is kind of early in her stages, I think, of processing and unpacking this, has released a book called Counting the Cost. It's by Jill Duggar. I haven't read it yet. I did watch a really long YouTube breakdown of it by someone that I follow who follows fundamentalist kind of problems and issues and stuff. And it sounds really interesting. And the people in these stories and the people in the social community, a social media community that I follow, they land on the spectrum as they unpack. Some are atheists and they're done. Some find a different spiritual path that helps them, feel the centered happiness that they want. And some of them just adjust what they've been in to a place where it's healthy and peaceful for them. And so it sounds like Jill is a variation of the end. She still has a faith in God, probably not dissimilar to her family, but she's unpacking it. There was this whole incident because she started wearing pants and her family was appalled. There was that huge patriarchal society of that is a big part of our experience. And I know I'm focusing on the Christian aspect because that's what I'm familiar with. I actually believe these kind of incidents could happen in any faith. It has to do with how it's presented, and people who like to control do find a way of using religion toward that end. And so that's why one of the things that I think is really important is question, question, question. And don't let people shame you for you're doing it. Because I'm just by nature a question asker. And I wasn't always doing the questions to challenge, but I read a lot. And I'd go, but wait a minute. And I was constantly, even with my attempts to both fit in, but also not violate my own integrity, I was called rebellious. You have a rebellious spirit, because I would ask questions, And that is a thing that I'm actually kind of proud of. At the time, it was a struggle. Now I'm like, you know what? They didn't break me. I kept asking those questions. I remember some examples personally of people that I knew about this whole, the example being like the Duggars, where especially if you were a daughter, you're raised, you belong to your father until he gives you to a husband, and you're never your own. I remember a girl going to her parents. She was unmarried. I think she was an adult, but unmarried. And she said, hey, I'd really like to get pierced ears. And their response was, well, maybe your husband will allow you to get pierced ears when you get married. It was never her decision, even as an adult. It was either dad says it's okay or your husband says it's okay, but that's it. And I get that there's really cultish overtones to this, which is where the trauma comes from. Another few examples taught in this: if you love something, if you're great at it, if you're passionate about it, better watch out. That's an idol. You got to give it up. I remember years and years ago, a bass player, really great bass player, and he's like, well, but you know what? I probably need to lay it down for the Lord. And a lot of people gave up gifts and talents and career paths because, it's becoming an idol for me, And And that didn't just rob them, but it robbed society at large of what they could have offered. Circling back to the second guessing and the questioning, here's the thing you heard most often. Jeremiah 17:9, the heart is deceitful above all things and beyond cure. Who can understand it? So whatever you do, do not trust your heart. Do not trust your instincts. We will let you know what you need to do. And I remember, even as I was unpacking, and even as I was letting these things go, and because there was just this epiphany moment, it was all a long time coming. I could see how far back it was actually reaching, but there was this moment when I just kind of stopped. I had been always challenged by all the times that I would ask questions and not be allowed to, and being told I was rebellious for doing so. And I finally kind of came to this moment. I said, you know what? I am going to ask any question I want. I'm going to explore it wherever it takes me, no matter what I'm told I'm supposed to think. And that was like that moment of breaking. There was a lot of unpacking that came after that, but that was the moment where I'm like, I'm done being told what I can think and what I can feel. And I had to process that a lot. And so, but as I did that, I remember lying awake at night going, what if I'm just really wrong and I'm going to go to hell now? Which was a very real fear. So here's some of the things that I began to do as I healed. I allowed myself to question anything and disagree with the answers I was expected to accept. People would say, this is the answer. They'd even make it sound very well reasoned, and I'd go, yeah, I still don't agree. You know, I started asking myself things like this. What do I think? What do I want? What if it's okay to be mad about this? You know, that was one of my positive what ifs. That shoving down of, you should never be angry. You should always be a shiny, happy person. They never used those words, but that was the intent. And I'd get angry about something and I'd feel so much shame. I should never feel this way. And I started going, hey, what if it's okay in this moment to be angry about this thing? And that was quite liberating, just that alone. I looked for ways of self-care. I looked for one of my TikTokers that I follow, she left Mormonism. And so she did a whole series where she'd get on there and go, ex-Mormon tries new things. And it was like, oh, I had this caffeinated drink, or I dyed my hair purple, or, for me, it was like, hey, I can finally really listen to rock and roll. And I've gotten tattoos. Now that sounds silly, but for me, it was a mark of liberation, And what I want to bring this back to is what was said in that second TikTok video. It's not a trendy thing. People are going, oh, these people just deconstructing. It's not just a trendy thing. It's a very real issue and that people are wrestling with and unpacking and triggered by things that other people don't get. Why would hearing that particular worship song just give you the twitches? And so I guess the point I want to bring to the end here is this, for that my understanding, my problem when I first started unpacking was I met a lot of great people who, like yourselves, when I started coming here, I know that there are probably people who've had similar experiences here as well, but there's some people who just never got that into it. I tend to be an all in or all out person. So when I was in, I was all in. And so for me to go and talk about things, I could see the desire to be supportive, but the confusion on their face going, but how did you let people control you that much? And I asked the same question, how did I let people control me that much, And so it was a challenge until I found that community of, oh yeah, been there, done that. And this is how it affected me. And this is how I've started to heal. And so I guess I just want to raise an awareness of the things that people have experienced. People just go, it's church. And people go, oh no. And there's a reason people just will never go back again. And it's sometimes to perfectly lovely, accepting, wonderful churches because of the deep-rooted things that have not been healed. So as a community, and this is one of the things that I love best about UU, but I've also found a lot of friends, here you can ask questions and not be expected to land on a specific answer. Here you can go, oh, I'm pagan, I'm an atheist, I'm a Christian, and we can all just be a support to ourselves, each other, but as individuals. The eyes are still in that potato. We get to be who we are as we do that journey. I'm really bad at landing the plane, Mark will tell you. So what I just want to do at this point is open up to any discussion or any questions that anybody might have. I also have a list of books if anybody wants more information.
Yeah, because people online cannot hear you.
I didn't have traumatic experiences as a Roman Catholic, but I had 12 years of parochial education, and I was always questioning because I was like born a feminist, and the patriarchy in the church was always like, this doesn't make sense to me. This doesn't make sense to me. But one of the things that made sense to me on why people stay in religions that are so controlling, much more even than the Roman Catholic Church, when I started learning about brain science, that when you are in a fear state, your more primitive parts of your brain are activated, and it impacts your critical thinking skills, the frontal lobe and those parts of your brain. And I'm like, okay, if you're reared in an environment that engenders fear, your brain is constantly in that place where you cannot critically think.
Mm-hmm.
So it started making sense to me. And so I thought, okay, how can people calm themselves, be grounded, so that then they can start using critical thinking skills and then saying, hey, this doesn't make sense. This doesn't, 1 and 1 doesn't add up to 2 here, and start doing that. So science really helped me approach it from a completely different lens, that people are in a state where they cannot be better. And our job as, I guess, citizens and part of the community is to just approach them like, just be calm and think about this, and not be judgmental, because it's not about their ability to really make alternate decisions. They are in a fear state, so their brain isn't functioning right.
Right. And making your own decision after that atmosphere is terrifying. And what if you're wrong? And that you also have to get uncomfortable with. I'm going to sometimes make a mistake, and that's going to be okay too.
Real quick, some of you remember a guy that used to go to this church who, when I tell you just his height, you'll know exactly who I'm talking about. He was 6'7", and I see a smile there. I know you know who I'm talking about, as do you. So I had a conversation with him the other day, and I said, well, how are you finding life and as you're getting older? He said, well, I figured out that I don't really care about what other people think. I just want to be thought of as something of a sage. And I've always thought of Lincoln as being a sage. He and I had a conversation early on when I first started coming to this church, and it was kind of revolving what you're talking about today, but it ended up with a conversation about Jefferson's Bible. And I don't know if anyone here, has anyone ever heard of Jefferson's Bible or ever read Jefferson's Bible? All of the stuff that we're talking about, all of the stuff and I'm the dumbest guy you'll see in the room, so this is just my opinion. But all of the stuff that we're talking about, all the manipulating and all that stuff, that's outside of the chapters that live in Jefferson's Bible, in my opinion. So those of you that have a brain about this stuff may know way better than I, but that's what it seems like to me. Just like the quote that you had. You'd never see anything like that in Jefferson's Bible. So just my nickel.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm going to apologize in advance because I am definitely still in my healing journey. surrounding this topic, so if I cry, just ignore me. I was never in one of those churches that is like women need to wear skirts and you have to have a lot of kids and things like that, but it is almost worse because it just proves that it doesn't require that kind of control to result in that kind of trauma. Because I still care about the youth pastor that I had. I will never badmouth him. He had no intention of this kind of result. And I do appreciate him because he never stopped me when I questioned. If he didn't have the answer, he said, I'll look into that and I'll get back with you. He said, honestly, I don't know. He never said, Kendall, stop asking those questions. And yet here I am. And it just sucks because and still, well, is that couple like that other couple? Is that couple gonna be the one that makes fun of me for wearing pants that have holes in them? Is that couple gonna tell me that I'm wrong for using they them pronouns? Is that couple gonna be the one that tells me that I'm ridiculous for not volunteering for more church things, or that I say cuss words? It's just, it sucks to not be able to fully trust people, even in a community where I know that I'm gonna be accepted. Because you never knew. Like, some of the people were super loving and understanding and they were wonderful, and I still talk to them today despite refusing to go to their church. I don't know how to relate that. And like, it is a very hard journey because I look back and I see all the things that were stifled. Like, I love to make art, but I was told if I didn't make art for the church that it wasn't worth making. And now I try to draw and I don't have those skills anymore because I let it sit on a back burner for so long. Sorry. But it influences every part of your life. Because I'm now at a point where I don't know what I want to do, because I was always told that God would lead you in a direction, and when you stop believing that God leads you in directions, where do you go? And it leaves you at a point where, whether you believe in God or not, you sit back and you go, what's the point? I don't have a purpose. I don't have anyone to talk to when there's not a human being standing in front of me. I'm used to having somebody to talk to up in the sky that would give me advice and direction and make me feel a certain way. And when that all dissipates, you're left alone. And I cannot imagine having been in it for any longer than I was. But I had the same experience where it was a lot of things leading up to a certain point where I said, I'm gonna look into everything. And I'm gonna do it without the influence of these people that keep telling me that I'm wrong, or that I need to stop thinking that way, or and then it became more than just searching for who God actually is, and you're left alone, and see the people that you've loved and cared about this entire time as like horrible, manipulative human beings, and it's a very lonely experience.
Yeah. Thanks for sharing.
Okay, this will be the last one. We are running late. Go on.
It seems very ironic and strange that within the context of religion, sometimes you find so much hatred. And if you need a regular reminder of that, it seems like about every 5 years, there's a TV movie based on a true story where often a male minister decides to kill his wife for the money. And you wonder, of the 10 commandments, it seems like most of us would accept that thou shalt not kill is very near the top. I'm not sure where it actually ranks, but most of us, I think, accept that. When Carol and I first got married, we had 2 young girls that were teenagers, and we were over in Henderson, and we decided to go around to about 4 different churches, and they were all sane and middle of the road places like the Methodists and the Presbyterians. And as a group, we decided it would be democratic to choose where to go. And so we voted in the end. We wound up being Presbyterians. And we went there for a number of years. It helped gave structure to our girls and put them on the right path and all that. And in that church, within about 5 or 10 minutes, they were preaching hatred. And from that context of they were quoting the Bible and they knew exactly what they were talking about. And I nudged Carol and I'm like, should we go right now or do we wait? And we waited. And as soon as we got out the door, we said, we're never coming back here again. And it wasn't but maybe a few weeks after that we came here. I think it was Joan that was the lady that was in charge back then.
Was that the last
Yeah.
minister?
Maybe. Yeah. She was the last one you could afford to pay as a minister, right?
That would be right.
She was just delightful and okay. Well, she was charismatic in a good way, delightful, fun, everything we were looking for, we found here. And it's that open concept that we're not sure, who knows, any religion might be correct, so we're not going to condemn anybody, and we're going to respect everybody. And that's what Carol and I were looking for, and we were so happy that we found this faith to be a part of.
I wanted to say before we wrap up is, I printed off a list of books, and there's like many more. And these are mostly memoirs by people who are not always from the same faith, but have experienced these kind of things. So if anyone is interested, I'm going to put these in the back so that you can have some books to explore if you want to go further with it.
Okay, thank you. And one last one. Was there anyone online who had something to say? That'll have to be our last one.
I think we're good. Go ahead.
Thank you. With that, okay, definitely a rousing piece of interesting information. Stan, if you're willing and able, for our closing hymn, which is number 1058, Be Ours a Religion.
This is 2 pages long. Be ours a religion which like sunshine goes everywhere. Its temple all space, its shrine the good heart, its creed all truth, its ritual works of love. Be ours a religion which like sunshine goes everywhere, its temple all space, its shrine the good heart, its creed all truth, its ritual works of love.
Now we'll extinguish our chalice. The words are in the order of service. We extinguish this flame in our hearts until we are together again. Mark, you have closing words? Okay, unforget.
So I found this online under Josh DeKeitzer, KEIJZER.com. I'll let you know the website if you want. He goes into each of these points, but I'm just gonna just say the 7. It's just wanted to give him credit on these 7 ways to overcome religious trauma syndrome. Number 1, overcome by not going back to the old paradigm that caused RTS. 2, overcome by finding friends who understand you and go through a similar process. 3, overcome by letting the anger come out, as Jamie said. 4, overcome by going to a therapist who will help you process the pain. 5, overcome by learning to embrace the world in its giveness. Giveness, I know isn't a word, but I like that because that's one thing we had to do. When what we were in before, you were taught the world is evil, the world is bad, do not be part of the world. And now we can just enjoy people, talk with anybody, and it's very freeing. Without having to change them. You're not going to be my ministry. 6, overcome by constructing better theology even when you're not a theologian. 7, overcome by being true to yourself and pursue your own path. As she said.
Thank you, Mark. So go in peace and light, and may your being bless the world.
We're going to be working on the fall festival booth. We had to bring it right up here by the door after the service here. We got some welding to do, some cutting, some drilling, some screwing. Anybody wants to hang out, enjoy all that fun.